Ibrahim Traoré is a Burkinabe military officer who rose from a junior artillery commander to become the country's transitional leader after a coup in September 2022. He is a young, charismatic, and polarizing figure, hailed by some as a defender of national sovereignty, and by others criticized for authoritarian measures and worsening security. Before we get in, please subscribe, like, and share. Early life and education. Traoré was born on 14 March 1988 in Kera, Bondoukoui, in Mohun Province, western Burkina Faso. He completed primary schooling in his home area and secondary studies in Bobo-Dioulasso, the country's second city. In 2006, he enrolled at the University of Ouagadougou, where he studied geology and was active in student associations. Sources say he graduated with honors before joining the military. These early facts help explain his image as both an educated village boy and a determined young officer. Military career. Jobs he worked. Traoré's professional life has been almost entirely military. Joined the Burkina Faso Armed Forces around 2009 and graduated from the Georges Namoano Military Academy in Po. Received further training abroad. Reports mention anti-aircraft training in Morocco and other courses. Served in peacekeeping and frontline roles. He was deployed with the UN mission in Mali, MINUSMA, and fought in Burkina's northern theater against jihadist groups. By 2020, he had been promoted to captain and was commanding artillery units. He emerged as a spokesman for soldiers frustrated by poor equipment, pay, and alleged corruption. How he became president. On 30 September 2022, Captain Traoré and a group of soldiers announced the removal of then-junta leader Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba, dissolving the government and suspending the constitution. Traoré's stated justification was the failure of Damiba's government to stop the expanding jihadist insurgency, a security argument that also tapped popular frustration. He was shortly named transitional president and leader of the junta, the MPSR. The takeover came less than a year after Damiba himself had seized power, making 2022 a year of rapid military turnover in Ouagadougou. What he has done, major policies and effects. Below are the main strands of Traoré's rule and what they have meant for Burkina Faso. Security and the military. Traoré has governed as a wartime leader. His government expanded and leaned heavily on irregular and civilian auxiliaries. The Volunteers for the Defense of the Homeland, VDP, launched mass recruitment drives. Authorities sought tens of thousands of volunteers and declared periods of general mobilization to fight Islamist groups. Critics and several monitoring groups warned these measures have deepened cycles of violence, increased civilian harm, and empowered local militias with little oversight. Meanwhile, large parts of the country remain contested by armed groups. Foreign policy and international alignment. The Traoré junta moved decisively away from France. France's troops left in early 2023 after the junta ended the military accord, and cultivated ties with other partners, notably Russia and to some extent Turkey. Burkina Faso also joined with Mali and Niger in a defense pact, the Alliance or Confederation of Sahel states, signaling a regional realignment and rejection of ECOWAS pressure. The shift has deep diplomatic and practical consequences: military cooperation, sanctions risk, and aid withdrawals. How Ibrahim Traoré addressed economic challenges. 1. Promoting national economic sovereignty and self-reliance. Refused loans from the IMF and World Bank, declaring that Africa doesn't need the World Bank, IMF, Europe, or America. Cleared domestic debt, easing reliance on external creditors. 2. Industrialization and value addition. Launched tomato processing plants, a first for Burkina Faso, reducing dependence on imports. Opened the second cotton processing plant and established a national support center for artisanal cotton processing to support local cotton farmers. approved construction of the country's first gold refinery in November 2023, creating direct and indirect jobs and retaining value domestically. 4. Resource sector reforms and nationalization. Suspended export permits for small-scale gold producers to curb illicit trade and increase state revenue. Nationalized mining assets, creating the state-owned SOPAMIB, and taking control of several operational and exploration gold mines, bringing significant volumes under state control. 5. Reviving agriculture and enhancing food security. Implemented a mechanization push, distributing hundreds of tractors, tillers, motor pumps, motorcycles, seeds, and inputs to farmers. Secured notable gains in crop production: tomatoes plus 45,000 tons, millet plus 193,000 tons, and rice plus 46,000 tons between 2022 and 2024. Advanced efforts towards food sovereignty through agri-poles, irrigation, and local processing units, reducing import dependency and empowering rural producers. 6. Infrastructure and industrial expansion. Inaugurated a flour mill, M2S, in March 2025, capable of processing 220 tons of flour per day, aiming to curb wheat import dependency. Launched a cement plant, CISINOB-SA, with a capacity of 2,000 tons per day, generating employment and supporting infrastructure development. Invested significantly in road development, turning gravel roads into paved highways, key for rural access and trade logistics. 7. Improving economic governance and public finance discipline. Reduced salaries of ministers and MPs by approximately 30%, while raising civil servant pay by approximately 50%, a move aimed at equity and morale. Strengthened anti-corruption and transparency measures, particularly in resource and public finance management. 8. Experiments with cooperative and community ownership. Advocated for worker-owned cooperatives and community enterprises as part of a new economic model, inspired by Sankara's legacy. Economic and resource policy. Traoré has tried to seize more national control over mining wealth. The government approved plans for a national gold refinery and moved to suspend or tighten export permits for small-scale gold production to clean up illicit trade, steps aimed at keeping more value in the country, but which have unnerved investors and raised questions about transparency and capacity. The junta has also signaled it may revisit foreign mining permits. Media, civic space, and human rights. Under Traoré, the state has restricted media and civic freedoms. French outlets, RFI, France 24, and others were suspended. Domestic critics and journalists have faced arrests, disappearances, and in multiple documented cases, forced conscription into the military. Human rights groups and press organizations have repeatedly condemned these tactics as violations that chill reporting and civic dissent. There have also been broader reports of summary detentions, asset freezes, and other measures to silence opponents. Human Rights Watch, Committee to Protect Journalists, Reporters Without Borders, Political Consolidation and the Promise of Elections. Traoré initially promised a transition back to civilian rule, but over time, the junta has delayed elections, extended its mandate through national consultations, and taken steps that centralize power, including purges and asset freezes in some instances. There was also an attempted counter-coup in September 2023, which underlined the fragility of his hold on the military. Observers worry about democratic backsliding even as some local constituencies continue to support the junta's tough rhetoric on sovereignty and security. The humanitarian and security toll since 2022, rising deaths, massive displacement, and territorial loss to armed groups, is central to assessments of his record. Ibrahim Traoré's rise is one of the most consequential developments in the Sahel in recent years. A young officer who promised to fix a brutal security crisis, but who has also overseen policies that polarize the country and shrink civil liberties. His tenure shows a trade-off many post-coup leaders claim to face: aggressive security measures, and resource nationalism in the name of sovereignty, at the cost of international isolation, investor uncertainty, and shrinking space for dissent. Whether his approach will ultimately restore state control and stability or deepen fragmentation and suffering remains an open and urgent question for Burkina Faso and the wider Sahel.